My name is Brianna Snyder. I'm the Senior Content Strategist for Overit in Albany. I have a background in news and journalism. I was a writer and reporter in Hartford at an alt weekly there that has since collapsed. And then about 8 years ago, I moved to Albany to work for the Times Union as a writer and editor there. And then about 4 years ago, I moved into marketing. So I've just been sort of flexing my journalist skill set in marketing, which has been a really fun experience. Heather, do you want to talk a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Heather Graham, and I'm an independent editorial and digital consultant. Right now, I'm working with Memorial Sloan Kettering's marketing and communications department, as well as the Daily Gazette's digital department. My background is also in media. I've been in digital media kind of from the start, so age has made it. I was a writer, but most of my career in news sites and lifestyle sites was as an editor.
Great. And Heather, you're in New York, right?
Yep, coming to you from Brooklyn.
Yay. What part of Brooklyn?
Crown Heights.
Oh, lovely. Is it hot there today?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I know, I don't want to wish away summer, but I'm excited for fall. Okay, so let's get going. Oh, you know what? First, I just want to tell everybody a little bit about Overit. I don't know if everyone who's signed up is familiar with our agency, but we are a full service creative agency based in Albany, New York. Our office is in this really neat old rehabbed church. I mean, when we, worked in an office, it was that anyway. Hopefully we'll be again soon. We do everything sort of nose to tail. We have copywriters, of course, content strategists, digital strategists, PPC wizards, developers, UX, UI experts, designers, illustrators, animators, videographers, photographers. We also have a full professional studio in the building where we do recording of voiceovers, podcasts. We've done a lot of musicians have come through and recorded in there. One time John Hamm came into the office, and I tell everybody that I did not try to smell him. I, as a rule, do not try to smell celebrities. However, I did get pretty close to him, so I feel like I got his essence. So just wanted to brag about that. So that's Overit. You can find us at overitmedia.com. I'm going to try to share my screen so you can see our presentation. There it is. Okay. All right, can everybody see that? Heather, you can see that, right? Oh, you're on mute. Okay. Okay, great. Okay, so I was so excited by the turnout for this. Looks like everybody is out of ideas, which makes us feel like a community of people without ideas. So I'm hoping that today you'll find a few useful resources. So Heather and I have talked about who we are, and let's just get right into it. So I like to start with the low-hanging fruit first. I find this accomplishes two things for me. The first is often the low-hanging fruit provides you with enough. There's often just little things that are there that you're overlooking. And the second thing is, it's just nice to get a few things off your list. It's an easy place to go. And if you've got sort of incentive, that whole thing of like make to-do list on your to-do list. This is kind of that version of that. So the first thing you want to do is look at what your competitors are doing. You're probably already doing this anyway, or if you're not, you should. It's a good idea to be aware of what they're doing, how they're talking to their audience, what their messaging is. Might not always be applicable to what you are doing, but certainly there's going to be overlap, and might as well tap into their brain trust. I am not talking about plagiarism. I am talking a bit about poaching and repurposing some of what they're doing for what you might be doing. A really fun example of this is, so I work in a lot of pest control. I work in a pest control vertical, so I work with a lot of pest control companies, and we were building a blog calendar a couple of months ago, and we were sort of just out of things to say about termites. Termites are actually pretty fascinating creatures, and I kind of love what I've learned about termites over the years of working with pest control, but But you kind of run out of things to say about termites. There's like a set of about 7 things people want to know. So we were sort of up against the wall. So we hit up terminix.com, which had a very fun blog post that was like, I think it was called Best Movies About Pest Infestations, which is a short list of film, mainly featuring Joe's Apartment, a movie that I don't even think I ever saw. But I thought that was a really clever idea, to pull pop culture into pest control. And so we did not use that idea. I mean, that would be plagiaristic and also useless because Terminix is going to get that traffic every time. But it did make us start to think more along the lines of silly, fun stuff. So we ended up doing a blog series on pest control through the ages. So like, how did the Victorians get rid of bed bugs, and how did the Elizabethans deal with cockroaches, which was a really fun, and my team did a really nice job researching that stuff, and the result was super engaging, really funny, informative, and cool. So so a lot can come just from, you know, peeking around at what your competitors are doing. Next, Heather's going to talk more about this, but a good starting place for now is just to look at your keywords and see if you've missed anything. They will change, of course, over time, but you might just want to review them wherever you've got them stored since the last time you put them together. You might have missed one, forgotten one, sidelined one. You're likely to find inspiration there every time. Go through your existing content. Excuse me. That was not a COVID cough. That was I breathed too hard in one direction cough. I just want to let everybody know that. Anyway, go through your existing content. This is an addition by subtraction strategy. This is anti-creating content. You are going to be deleting content that does not perform, that is no longer functioning on your site or never did function on your site. If you have a piece in your archives that's been there since 2014 and it's gotten 17 hits, evaluate its keywords and its metadata to make sure that you have set it up for success. But if it's not performing well, it's not doing you any favors on your site. Cut it out. This is going to help focus traffic where you want it to go, and just stop diluting traffic with that trash no one's reading anyway. And it feels good. It feels good to purge that stuff that nobody's looking at. Watch TV. Okay. So a few months ago, right before COVID, I gave a talk in Austin about how art can inspire marketing content. It's a little lofty, or maybe it's obvious or pretentious or insufferable, but I'm a big believer in using art to inspire our content. I worked with a reporter once who talked about reading the backs of toothpaste bottles for story ideas, and this is kind of a similar thing. Why art is compelling is because it tells us stories of emotions and people and feelings. And the more that we get exposure to that, the more we're building our collective empathy and figuring out how to articulate more precisely a feeling or an emotion or an idea for our clients. So a nice example of this is I went to Mass MoCA last weekend, and there was a huge exhibit there by this woman named Liddell Moe, and she had sort of built, she's a sculpturist, and she had built these huge pieces in this very, if you've been to Mass MoCA, you know, there's like a big warehousey space. She had these big pieces that were, they were monuments to victims of war and violence. And so the comment of the piece was pretty simple, which is that we have traditionally built monuments to heroes. She wanted to build monuments to victims, people whose names you never learn or faces you never see, which I think is also politically relevant to the moment. But that simple inversion of a convention, you know, we usually build monuments to heroes. Let's build monuments to the victims. It was really simple, but really powerful. And I don't mean to exploit her beautiful work of art for my marketing needs, but you think about just using that application, you know, flipping something on its head and how it applies to really great engaging content, surprising big ideas. It's all there. And this is, you can find this in trashy reality TV too. Just the way people are talking to each other, expressing a feeling. I really believe passionately in passively getting ideas from everything you're looking at, reading, listening to. It's all there, but that's a sort of more inactive way of getting content, but still a really reliable way. Okay, so now it's time for the hard stuff. This is a little more labor intensive. The first thing you want to do here is go back over your market research and refresh your personas. So you want to go back, make sure that your industry information and research data, all that stuff is updated. You want to make sure that that your personas are still relevant, that you're talking to who you want to be talking to. Do you need to add a persona, subtract some things? Just go back over all of that, update it, do mini audits of the sites of your content, make sure that it's all working the way that you need it to. The writer Anne Handley talks about radical empathy. I'm sure that you've encountered this notion before. This is where you do everything you can to get into the mind of your persona, which is a little bit of what I was just talking about with art. But this means taking a radical empathy approach to persona building means that you put yourself in the position of the persona in a really, really intense way, which I think can be super fun. I mean, you can make like a sim family of your personas and like make them go on vacation, give them clothes. What would their favorite color be? What do they like to cook on the weekends? Favorite board game? You know, really getting those details down might feel a little bit silly, but they also start to open up more sort of possibilities about what they could be thinking about and where you might be talking to them, what they might be interested in. So it's definitely a really important exercise. In addition to this, you should be interviewing your personas. Talk to people who are current happy customers, talk to people who are unhappy customers, talk to people who have never heard of your business. This is 101 stuff, I know, but it's time to go back out and talk to them again. The way that they're interacting with your product is changing all the time. And so are they. People are just changing. So it's worth it to go back out, make sure that you're having conversations. Convert old content to a new medium. I'm going to let Heather talk about this later too, but this is just a nice way to go back and repackage old content in a new way. People are going to receive information in all kinds of different mediums, I guess is the word. So make sure that you're giving it to them in those different mediums so that they have access to it. There's a really good book, came out in 2016, called They Ask, You Answer by Marcus Sheridan. And in that book, if you haven't read it, he talks about being very transparent about the aspects of your product, service, company that you would rather sort of hold closer to the chest. A big example of this is pricing. What your customer or your prospect wants to know is how much your service or product is going to cost them. So if you're holding that information back, hoping that down the funnel, you'll share it with them and they might become sort of more engaged at that point or more open to paying what you're asking for at that point, you're kind of doing yourself a disservice because they're looking for it at the top of the funnel. And if they're looking for it, then they're going to find it. And they might find it in a place that you don't want them to find it. If you're open, transparent, and direct with them, if you provide that with them on your site, you're in control of that information, first of all, which is important. And second, you're building trust with them and credibility for yourself because they see that you're being very direct and open with them and they want that. And so it's a good idea to go back through and look at what questions people might be searching or that you might be avoiding in your content. This is a hard one because you've got to do, if you're working with a client, it's a tough thing to decide to do. I mean, you've got to kind of like let some ugly stuff out potentially if you want to be honest about what weaknesses are in your product compared to your competitors, or what are some of the criticisms you've received about your product. There are ways to be really open and address those things head on that can serve your audience in a way that's really, really great. And serving our audience is what we want to do, right? I mean, the whole premise of content marketing is informing people of how you can help them. And so if you keep that top of mind, then this whole scary, like tell them the dirty stuff, just sort of comes naturally next. So I highly recommend doing that. Mediums and the messages. So here's just a list I use for reference when I'm trying to figure out what kind of content I want to create. It's a good thing to cycle through these so that you're not creating, 50 blog posts in a row, which I know lots of you know not to do. But so this is just like a helpful tool when I'm trying to remember what is content, what kind of content exists, what should I do? So screenshot this, or I can send it out to people if you want. By the way, if anyone's asking questions, I don't really see the thing, so we'll probably just have to wait till the end. Finally, Anne Handley, the content writer, content marketing writer, has these prompts in her book called Everybody Writes, which I really recommend. Just another way to get sort of brain juices going. What's commonplace to you that might be interesting to other people? Never forget that someone is always going to be interested in every aspect of what you're doing. Remember Yahoo Answers and all of the weirdos who ask questions that you can't believe need to be asked, which I guess now has been supplanted by Quora. I was just thinking last night about how embarrassing it is when you're like looking up something on Quora and then they email you the next day and they're like, are you still interested in knowing if, you know, accidentally eating nail polish can kill you or whatever? And you're just like, oh no, I can't believe there's a record of that. In anyway, you guys can write a blog post about that. What events outside your industry or in the larger world might provide inspiration? Get out of the office, don't get stuck behind your screen, go out, go walking around, go talk to people, go to trade shows, video conference with people, of course. Draw offbeat analogies from your own life. This is more about building that radical empathy, using what you've experienced to inform what other people might be experiencing. Write for your audience's audience. This is an opportunity to use all of your historical institutional knowledge in a bigger way. It's a big undertaking, but there's a lot of potential in it. So when I talk to our clients, one thing that I'm always really moved by isn't just like the depth and breadth of their information, their knowledge, their authority on the topics or the subjects that they work with every day, but this is their passion, this is their life, this is not a second thought to them. And so that information could be useful. That's content that could apply industry-wide. And so if you committed to a vertical maybe that talked about industry trends, innovations, techniques, discoveries, whatever information you have, if you wanted to build that out, it's good for traffic, it's good for establishing deep thought leadership. There's a lot of potential there to talk to that bigger audience using the information you have. And finally, here's a really, really fun one. Film yourself interacting with your product and explaining its every function. Take your like cell phone camera, go out with I'll use pest control again as an example. But if you go out and follow a tech around and follow yourself or film yourself saying, you know, like, what's in the tank? What's in the chemical? Why are you spraying it there? What would happen if a dog licked it? What would happen if I licked it? What would happen if, you know, if a squirrel encountered it? We can cover all the animals, wildlife who might encounter the chemical. But as the tech sort of keeps performing that treatment or that service, new questions are going to arise, and you're going to end up not even just with a huge amount of content, which you will, which you can cut up and use in all kinds of different ways. But you'll also have a deeper understanding of what that product or service or client does, which is important. It's a really good idea to just get as acquainted with what you're working with as you can. So those are all of my writing and content creation ideas. Now I'm going to turn it over to Heather, who can tell you how to get people actually in front of this content. Heather, you go for it.
Okay, hi everyone. Again, my name is Heather, and I'm going to talk to you about content, creating it, and getting it out there. So I'm driving now. I'm not driving now.
Sorry, I forgot to give you the thing. Do you got it? Okay, good. No?
There we go. Okay. So we're going to start off by stop doing 5 things as a way to create your content strategy. And this is kind of a back to the basics, taking a step back from what you've been doing, reevaluating some things, and then how to move forward. So the first thing is you don't want to ignore your audience. If you listen to them, they're going to tell you what they want. I can't drive through.
Oh no. Is it working now?
Yeah. So you don't need to reinvent the wheel. I'm really not.
Okay, I'll do it. I can do it.
Don't overlook new mediums. Don't be a wallflower. And don't forget Google. Okay, so let's dive into the first thing. So don't forget your audience. Listen to what they want. As I said before, they're gonna tell you. And how do you do that listening? First, you're gonna use analytics. That is a great empirical way to find out what people are reading. You wanna know what they're reading. You wanna know where they're reading it. And you wanna know the different segmentations of your audience. So your folks on Facebook, your folks on Twitter, your folks on Insta, they're different groups of people to a certain extent, and you want to know what they're reading on those platforms, and you want to know what content is working the best. So I probably would just use, cool pictures on Instagram. And you want to be a part of the conversation when you're putting out that content. So no one really likes a one-way conversation. So if you're just talking to me and then you walk away, I'm sort of like, well, what was that about? You want to interact on social. So you're going to ask questions, and then you're going to listen to folks' answers, and then you're going to answer them back. So if somebody has a question for you, don't just let it hang in the ether. Talk to them about it. And then last is source your audience for content. So this is where you can find out what's relevant to them. So, first, what are they talking about? Observe your audience on social. What are the things that they're sharing? What are the things that are the most commented on? A lot, depending on your business, you might get emails from people or phone calls. At the Daily Gazette, we get reader phone calls every day, and letters and emails. And that is a way to say, okay, what we think people want may not be what they want, because they're telling us what they want. And I will say that during those conversations, don't ask yes and no questions if you want to get information, because that doesn't give you anything. Just, ask a leading question, and then you'll get some opinions. Some you may not like, some you will like. Okay, the next thing is that we don't want you to reinvent the wheel. We want you to reinvent the content. So we talked about before, what can you mine and refresh and repurpose? That can be any piece of content. It can be on your website. It can even be on your social platforms. If you're on Twitter, it's fine to retweet the same thing, 2 days later, because it's such a quick hit platform that things go so quickly. Now you want to update, not create new content. So I think that this is important, because when you find a piece of content that, say, performed well 2 years ago and is overall still relevant, but maybe there's some updated information you can add, maybe there's some information that kind of dates the piece and you want to take it out. I think a good example of what not to do is BuzzFeed recently had a slideshow, or a multi meme article. Sorry, it's early. And so the original one was 11 times celebrities snap back to Ellen DeGeneres. And of course, that's a pretty relevant topic right now. People are supporting her, hating on her, talking about what's going on with her as the boss, and bad things happening to her staff. And then rather than just kind of updating it, they created 2 copies of that article with all the same memes, all the same embeds. And then it was, went from 11 to 15, and then went from 15 to 18. If I was that editor personally, I would have just gone back to the first piece of content, added the new information, changed it to 18, and kept the same URL. In my experience from my work on news sites and lifestyle sites, that worked better for us, and it kept building on the SEO value that we already had in the beginning. Also, consider new formats. So take something and think about, how else can I present this? Can I pull certain things out and make a listicle? Could I change it into just a graphic presentation and make an infographic? Does it actually make a good video? How-to content, they can be great videos. And then lastly, use trends to your advantage. So what's everyone talking about? And I think this goes back to Bree's point about, you know, getting out of the office, watching TV, seeing what your competitors are doing. It's the only way for you to be relevant if you're part of what's kind of happening around you. And you can do that in news. You can do that with products that you're promoting. You can do that if you're a chiropractor and you're building your website. You can still do all of that. Okay, so don't overlook new mediums. To continue on to new formats. So whatever you're doing, what else can you be doing? Can you write a blog or some articles? Can you create infographics? Can you do slideshows? Can you do a video series? Have you been sending newsletters out to your audience, which is a really good way to get folks to your content. So they may not drive right to your site when they go online and say, oh, I'm going to go to this site. Through newsletters, you're going to be able to bring that audience straight to your content. Do you want to start a podcast? That's become very popular. Make sure it's interesting. And then you can serialize content, which means you know what serialized means. And you can do that in different formats. You can do that. I mean, that's really, I feel like a lot of good podcasts are, for me, they kind of focus on the same topic. But you can do it in videos. You can do it in blogs. You can do it anywhere. And it's just a matter of, you know, stay tuned or read more about X tomorrow or next week, however you want to do it. People are, if they're interested in the topic and they're interested in the content, they're like, yeah, I want to know more. I want to know more about those termites. I'll come back, see what's going on. Okay, don't be a wallflower. So there's so much content out there in on every platform, in every medium. How do you get people to notice you? So you want to write great headlines and you want them to be enticing. They don't need to be clickbait. As a matter of fact, I stay away from clickbait. They don't need to be fancy or pithy, but they need to be clickable. So something like, you know, how do I use my Instapot and what to cook? That says what it is, and people who have Instapots like me and don't know what they're doing with them can click on that article. Also, like right now, you could do something like in our own words, a reader experience with COVID. People are interested in that. There's so much scientific information and it's become very political. Oh, but you're going to tell me how you survived with COVID. I'm interested in that. The next is that your headline should also be able to tell folks what your piece is about with zero content. So anyone who's, you know, worked in print or magazines, the tradition has been kind of to like write like cool, pithy headlines, but you always have a subject line or a subhead underneath that then explains what you're writing about. We don't really do that digitally. So if I had a blank wall and I wrote the title, you should know exactly what that means and then want to click on it. Okay. Subject lines. And make sure you have great headlines for social too. So what can play, you know, on your website, on your podcast, what plays there may not play well on social. First of all, there's a character limit. So if you just want to be a little technical about it, you only have a certain amount of space. So if you have a really great longer headline on your blog piece, when you share it on social, it's going to get cut off. On any CMS that you work on, you should have different fields we can get into backend stuff if you want, but you should have different fields where you can create like your social headline, can be for Twitter, Facebook, whatever. So you want to make sure that what you're doing there is going to get you shared. Okay, subject lines. So a newsletter subject line is the same as a headline. Make it strong, make it shorter. One of my pet peeves is I get emails every day, all day, from like the New York Times or the Daily News, breaking news. And then it's like one additional word and it cuts off. So what's the breaking news about? Just have it there. I find that a lot of businesses that are that have services or products actually do subject lines really, really well. So I would suggest maybe signing up for a couple of newsletters that are similar business and see what they're doing. And also learn from, maybe I don't want to do that. Maybe that's not a good experience. And then lastly, images. Add an image to every piece that you can. An image, a piece of content with image, whatever it is with an image, is more likely to be read and it's to be clicked on and read and more likely to be shared. All right. Don't forget about Google. Google is the great mystery that we all try to figure out, but there are some things that we do know, so try to apply them when you're creating content. So Bree mentioned get your keywords. What is it that you're going to write about? If you don't know what you're going to write about, look up some popular keywords and then create a piece of content from that. When you write your headlines and when you're writing content, think about what people are searching for. So no one is going to search for Instapot. Well, they may search for Instapot chicken, but think about how they would say. It would be more like, how do I make chicken in my Instapot? So you want to write for how people actually talk, what they're going to search for. You can create, I'll say one more thing on keywords and content. You can also, there's a lot of different keyword tools out there that you can use. Google has one, Keywords Everywhere, and you can see how many people are searching for a certain keyword or phrase. You can also see how competitive it is. I would say don't pick the most competitive because then you're just gonna kind of drown in a sea of other results. But you don't want to pick something that no one is searching for. So you got to find the happy medium. SEO titles. So SEO titles can be different from your headlines, and depending on the length of your headline, I suggest writing an SEO title as well. And they're about, I think, about 60 characters. You should look in your CMS in the SEO field. But you want to get keywords in that title and kind of make, still make it clickable. But if it's too long, SEO is going to cut it off, and then you're going to end up with the New York Times, breaking news, Trump. Okay, well, what is that? What does that mean? I'm not necessarily interested in that. Also, don't keyword stuff. When you're writing organic content or you're creating graphics that have organic content, you're probably not going to keyword stuff because you're actually writing about the thing that people are looking for or that you're trying to put out. So those keywords and those keyword phrases are going to naturally appear in your content. If you try to stuff them in because you think, oh, Google will notice this, or Bing, I mean, I know there's more search engines, but everybody uses Google. If you try to stuff them in, Google will recognize that and then they'll ding you for doing that. So it's not going to push you up in rank, it's going to push you down. Your URLs, just quickly, and this is, we can, anybody who wants to talk about backend stuff, we can do that. You want to have your URL set up. You don't want just a long string of numbers. You want to include, like, if there's a section on your site, the date, the headline itself. You kind of want to get all of that in there. Part of the reason you want to have keywords in your headline is because then you'll have keywords in your URLs. And if you use something like WordPress, you can just set it to a certain convention, and it'll always generate that style headline. So you don't have to, or that style URL. So you don't have to worry about it. Images, again. Add an alt text to your image. And a reason for that is because it gives you a little bit more SEO. You want to, don't just say dog. If you're writing about Dobermans, you want to say Dobermans. You want to be specific to what you're writing about. It's not very long field, maybe 100 characters. And again, don't keyword stuff. And then lastly, with Google or any search engine, get help. So this is actually a specialty. SEO is a specialty. It's not something that we all naturally know about. You can read some sort of basic tips and instructions online, but I would say get help with your SEO. I've done that at the different sites I've worked at, hired professionals, or we've had an analytics department individually to handle that, because my bag is writing content and editing it. I'm not a specialist in SEO, but from what I've learned over time, I've kind of learned that these are the main things that you should focus on. And then the last thing I'll say about Google, it's actually the last thing I'm gonna say, meta descriptions. This again, back-end stuff. And that's really just a little bit of a teaser about what your content is about. Now, Google may not, on the rankings page when you go and you search in Instapot, Google may put that meta description on. They may take their own snippet out of your content you don't really know. So that not necessarily going to give you higher rankings, but what does give you higher rankings is the more people who click on your piece of content that tells Google, okay, this is like got some credibility. And so if you have a good meta description and it's displayed, people will click on it. So I think that's all I have to say. I would say that for your business, you know, we all have specific needs in business. So this is more of an overall look, and that you should really kind of drill down on these pieces and tailor them for your business and what you do and what you're pushing out.
Heather, thank you so much. That's so important, because I know sometimes as a content person, I can get a little bit lazy about those tags. I get sort of overwhelmed by like, I don't know what to fill out. I'll let the digital team do it. But that's stuff that content people should and can do. So thank you so much. I'm gonna exit this presentation. If people have questions, looks like I can see, hold on. There we go. Can you share those content creation points? Great question. We can send those out. Yeah, definitely. Does anybody else have any questions about some of what we're talking about today? Anyone want to know why I'm Googling what happens if you eat nail polish, or why I'm so fixated on pesticides getting into dogs' mouths? I'm very worried about, oh, thank you. Very worried about contamination lately. Copyright issues. Dale wants to know if we're going to address copyright issues. Dale, can you be more specific? You mean about copywriting our own content? I'm going to assume that Dale's talking about copywriting your own content. I think that's a bureaucratic obstacle course that probably isn't worth pursuing for most things. But I have no authority on that topic. I would have to, I'm happy to look into it and get back to you though. Heather, do you know anything about copyright? You're on mute, by the way.
Yeah. Am I on mute still? Can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you.
Okay. I am not going to give you too much advice because it's not my specialty. I know that if you create it and publish it and it's yours, be careful not to violate copyright. So if you saw a great piece of content that you want to share or would be a great kind of embed in what you're doing, you have to credit it where it came from. And I would say link back to it as well. In looking for photos for your your content or newsletters or how you're promoting it, you can't just take a photo from somewhere. Again, you want to make sure that it's labeled for reuse. I would tend to go to like the photo repositories that is for anybody to use. but just be careful about that. And, you know, general rule is if you're unsure, don't do it until you get a solid answer.
Yeah, there's a lot of free stock sites, and there's also Creative Commons. So if you search Creative Commons, it's often Flickr photos that people have made available for public use. Those are often fair game, and they'll tell you that they're open for use. And don't be afraid to take pictures yourself. These cameras are insane on our phones now. If you put portrait mode on, which I do all the time and annoys everybody, everything looks beautiful or insanely good. Probably professional photographers might disagree, but no, it's totally serviceable at the very least for a blog post or for any piece of content.
Yep. And oh, I'm sorry, Bree.
No, go ahead.
So I was just going to say, so like reporters at the Daily Gazette, we tell them, bring your iPhone. If something's happening and you run into it, take photos of it. So you'll see content where the photo credit is the writer of the article.
So Felicia asks, what if the majority of the org's membership doesn't interact on social media much? Is it worth still trying to get it going? I say yes. I say invest the time to do that. You might want to supplement with some paid depending on who you're trying to reach and how quickly you're trying to reach them. But I think it's definitely worth the investment. Do you agree, Heather?
I do. And I also would say if social media isn't going to be your biggest traffic driver, then what is? So if they're not super engaged on social, while you try to build an audience and also kind of branch out and see if you can draw in new audience, if the major way that they interact in content is newsletters, then start doing a newsletter and do it really well.
Yeah, and Felicia, maybe it might be worth examining whether that's the right social platform for your audience. Some might be more responsive to Twitter or Instagram. Feel free to email me if you want to go over details specific to what your concern is, and Heather and I can help you workshop that. Let's see. Someone anonymous says, how are you allocating time to accomplish elements? If this is a time management question, yes, it's important. It's important to make that part of your process, whether you're making a calendar early on in the month or the quarter. A year is a lot to take on, especially since you want to be agile to whatever's trending, as Heather was talking about. But certainly at the very least monthly or quarterly, making a content calendar and getting everything sort of set up to be built, written, spend a day or two getting everything produced, then you've got it all in the can and you can schedule it throughout the quarter or the month.
And prioritize, really. You really have to prioritize. Don't spend too much time working on something that your readers aren't going to, or your users aren't going to use or share or be interested in.
Someone else anonymous asked, how do you make a piece of content friendly for social media? Are there any tips? Yeah, so first of all, character counts are important. I came across this list of character limits and counts for most popular platforms. And it turns out something like Facebook only really wants 140 characters in that share text. And you can, they allow something like what, Heather, like maybe 1,500? You could type not a whole novel, but you could type, and you've probably seen those statuses where you have to like read more. I can't believe I have to read more. That's insane.
Yeah. Nobody wants to read more.
Yeah, nobody wants to read more. They don't want to read at all. They're scrolling for the most part. So the more scroll adapted you can make your social content, the better. So if you have a graphic, for example, I would put like no more than 7 words on it. Don't try to pack too much into that space because no one's spending time on it. You want them to scroll it, see it, remember it, come back to it later, or recognize your brand. So brevity is key, right, Heather?
I would agree.
Okay. Dale is asking again about copyright. I know about it. Oh, I'm discussing how to avoid violating copyright and the risks associated. Yeah, so like we were saying, I would just stick to fair use, public domain stuff. Dale, if you want to talk more about your specific case, you should definitely reach out to us after the webinar. Let's see. Thoughts on content syndication, using written content from other sites on your website with permission. can you repost articles from sites like Feedly? Okay, so you can do this. I wouldn't recommend it because it's already, Heather, you might be better equipped to talk about this. My impression is that that's not going to do much for your site traffic because it's content that exists somewhere else. But Heather, would you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, there could be a reason why you want to do it. If you're going to repost content from another site, make sure you get permission to do it, but because it's not your own content, I would say there has to be kind of a reason that you would do it. So if it's something really important that you think your audience should know, and this place said it the best, you know, something like that. But ultimately, you know, but then on the other hand, if somebody wants to post your content, you can say yes and tell them this is how you do it. Please link back to us. Please, you know, make sure our brand, our byline, et cetera, is on there. Because that can help you.
Yeah, right. That could be sort of backlink strategy.
Yeah.
But generally, I would say you're going to be better off writing your own content just because people want to know, they just want to hear from you about your specific service or product. But yeah, like Heather said, there might be occasions that makes sense, especially if you're sharing and linking to each other. Any good strategies to get unwilling or unchanging coworkers to adapt new creative ideas? Oh, yeah. Okay, let's go back to radical empathy. Why is this coworker so unwilling to change? Chances are they're afraid or intimidated. They don't want to look stupid. They want to feel like they know what they're doing. This is very much a human resources manager or sort of people management approach, I think, to things. But I think it's a lot of cajoling and being supportive. I realize that's a real soft skills response, but I think it's a soft skills solution. Heather, would you agree?
I do agree, and I definitely think the why is important. So you getting across the why. So, you know, people don't want to do things like you said because they're afraid, they're intimidated. But why is it important that we're doing this thing? If I don't understand why it's important, then I don't understand why I have to do it.
Yeah.
And the other thing is that, you know, you may be an expert on something that one of your colleagues doesn't really know about. So you have to show them, you have to train them, and you have to meet people where they are. If they don't know anything, then you start there. If they know a lot, but they need a little bit of something else, you don't have to go back to the beginning because they know that. Just kind of pick up where they've left off and move forward.
Yeah, and I hate to make you, do the work of this, but sorry, I'm hearing an echo. I'm trying to wait for it to go away. Okay, good. One other strategy is to make a standard operating procedure. So make it really easy for them to follow that new operational system, whatever strategy you have. And just come back to them and say, hey, I noticed you didn't meet, you know, these 3 items in the checklist. Do you mind just doing them again? That's a little bit of babysitting, but until sort of new habits are built, it kind of requires a little bit of that, I think. Dale asks, can you use a YouTube link in your blog? Sure, absolutely. It's a good idea. Posting YouTube content in your blog. Yeah, definitely. And that's a good, well, actually, does a YouTube link function as an image, Heather, or should you also have an image?
That's actually a good question. I'm thinking about plugins that work that way.
I think I see a lot of screenshots of the video as the photo, which is another photo workaround.
Yeah, that's a good question, Dale. We're happy to get back to you about that, specifically about embedding into the piece, but absolutely you should link to.
Yeah. We didn't talk as much about YouTube this time. That should be another webinar, but YouTube, remember, is one of the biggest search engines on the internet. So having content on YouTube is invaluable. Pip says, if I have quite a lot of information to get across, how do I keep it brief but get people to read the specifics? We're a training company advertising open courses. So it's okay to have a lot of information. I mean, if we're talking about a blog post, which is kind of like the default piece of content, then subheads are your friend for something like this. You can make really big, bold headlines or subheadlines that give that specific information. Again, everything should be skim friendly. So if I can like scroll through your blog post and take away 7 or 8 bullets that have been highlighted in a big way through the post, that's fine to have supplemented with all of that other information. Let's see. Oh, someone asks, are there any newsletters you recommend on content? You know, Heather, do you have anything? I feel like I'm kind of basic. I do sort of like Moz, and HubSpot has great newsletters. Again, Anne Hanley has some stuff. I follow her on Twitter, which is not a newsletter. I don't know that she has a newsletter, but I could pull some people and send that out too. Heather, do you have any that you like?
So I'm a news junkie, so most of my newsletters are from different news sites, but I also, like I used to read The Skim. It doesn't really skew so much to my age group, but I think that they do some good writing, so I used to read that a lot. Businesses that I like, and I like they're frequent, I actually get their newsletters all the time. But
what did you say? I didn't hear it.
So a business that I like, if I buy their products a lot or I shop in their store, I always sign up for their newsletters because that's a great way for me as the consumer to find out if there's a sale, if there's something going on, and it's a great way as the marketer to tell me 10% off, come on in.
Yeah, you know, retail has really mastered, some retail outlets have really mastered the newsletter. I've been noticing that Urban Outfitters snagged me, and so I open every single one of their newsletters. They somehow managed to, I know you're asking about newsletters on content. I'm just talking about examples of great newsletters. So Urban Outfitters, Glossier, I'm obsessed with Glossier. I open up all of their email. Yeah. They're just masters of subject lines. And but yeah, so we'll assemble a list of good content newsletters. Like I said, there's Moz, HubSpot has some
Rush,
stuff.
I think is good.
Yeah, CM Rush, and then Anne Hanley. So yes, so we'll send that out too. Yeah, okay, Lisa says Anne Hanley has an amazing newsletter. Thank you, Lisa. All right, I think that's all the questions. Everybody, thank you so much for coming. This was really fun. And I think we'll send something out after the fact that has links to some of these materials. And again, please feel free to reach out to Heather and me if you have any questions specific to what we talked about, or if you have your own sort of problem you're trying to work through. We're happy to help you. And yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.